The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Grand Central Station. Marcus Hayes sat hunched on a cold bench near the east entrance, his weathered hands clutching a worn backpack that contained everything he owned in this world. His gray beard was unkempt, his clothes layered and dirty from months of living on the streets. At 53 years old, he looked much older, the lines on his face telling stories of hardship that most people walked past without a second glance. The station buzzed with life around him. Businessmen in sharp suits rushed past, their leather shoes clicking against the polished floor. Women in designer clothes hurried by with their morning coffee, eyes fixed on their phones. Students with heavy backpacks weaved through the crowds, earbuds blocking out the world. To all of them, Marcus was invisible, just another homeless person, another problem they had learned to look past, another reminder of a world they preferred to ignore. Marcus watched them all with tired eyes. He remembered a time when he had been one of them, when he had worn suits and carried briefcases, when he had a home, a family, a life that made sense. That felt like a lifetime ago now, like a dream that belonged to someone else entirely. The recession had taken his job first, then the bills piled up, then his wife left, taking their daughter with her. Then the house was gone. Then everything else followed, one piece at a time, until he found himself here on this bench, with nothing but memories and a backpack. But there was one thing that had never left him, one thing that poverty and loss could not steal away: music. It lived inside him still, as real and present as his own heartbeat. Even now, sitting on this hard bench, his fingers would move unconsciously, playing invisible keys, running through scales and melodies that only he could hear. Music had been his first love long before everything else. His mother had taught him to play when he was 5 years old, her gentle hands guiding his small fingers across the ivory keys of their old upright piano. He closed his eyes and could still hear her voice, still feel the way the keys felt under his fingers when he played his first complete song. Music had been his escape, his joy, his purpose. He had dreamed of concert halls and recordings, of sharing his gift with the world. Life had other plans, of course. Practical plans. His father insisted he study business, get a real job, build a stable life. So Marcus had put his dreams in a box and done what was expected. But the music never left him. It waited, patient and constant through all the years of spreadsheets and meetings and obligations. Now, those obligations were gone. The stable life had crumbled, and the music remained the only loyal companion in his darkest days. Sometimes, late at night in the shelter, he would close his eyes and play entire concertos in his mind, his fingers moving through the air, every note perfect and clear. It was the only thing that kept him sane, the only thing that reminded him he was still human, still himself, still Marcus Hayes beneath all the dirt and loss. The station was getting busier now. The morning rush was building, and Marcus knew he would have to move soon. Security guards had a habit of clearing out the homeless before the crowds got too thick. They did it politely usually, but firmly. This was not a place for people like him. This was a place for people going somewhere, people with destinations and purpose. He was just taking up space that belonged to someone more important. He stood slowly, his knees aching from the cold and damp. His eyes scanned the massive hall, taking in the soaring ceilings and elegant architecture. Grand Central Station was beautiful, even he could admit that. It was like a cathedral dedicated to movement and progress, to the American dream of always moving forward, always striving for more. He wondered what the architects would think if they knew their masterpiece now served as a temporary refuge for people who had nowhere else to go. As he adjusted his backpack, something caught his eye. There, in the corner near the main waiting area, sat a piano. It was not new, but it was beautiful. A glossy black grand piano, placed there as part of some art installation or public music program. Marcus had seen it before, had watched well-dressed musicians sit down to play for the passing crowds. He had always kept his distance, knowing it was not meant for people like him. But today something pulled him toward it. Maybe it was the way the morning light hit the keys. Maybe it was the emptiness of the bench, inviting and open. Maybe it was just that the music inside him had been silent for too long, trapped in his mind with no way to be real, no way to be heard. Whatever it was, Marcus found his feet moving toward the piano before his mind could stop them. He stood beside it for a long moment, his hand hovering over the keys but not touching. He could see his reflection in the polished black surface. The reflection showed him what everyone else saw, A homeless man, dirty, unwanted, out of place. He saw the stains on his jacket, the holes in his fingerless gloves, the wildness of his uncombed hair. This piano was too beautiful for hands like his. This instrument deserved better than to be touched by someone who lived on the streets. But the pull was too strong. The music inside him was too loud to ignore any longer. Slowly, carefully, Marcus sat down on the bench. The leather was soft and clean, so different from the hard surfaces he was used to. He placed his backpack beside him and looked down at the keys. They gleamed in the morning light, pristine and perfect. 88 keys, each one a doorway to a world he had lost. He lifted his hands, positioning them over the keys the way his mother had taught him all those years ago. His fingers trembled slightly from cold and nervousness and anticipation. Around him, the station continued its morning rhythm. Thousands of people moving through their day, completely unaware of the moment about to unfold. Marcus took a deep breath. Then gently, reverently, he placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. The first note rang out clear and pure, cutting through the noise of the station like a bell. Marcus felt it resonate through his entire body. A vibration that went deeper than sound, deeper than music. It was like coming home after years of wandering lost. His fingers found their way across the keys as if they had never left, muscle memory and soul memory combining into something that felt more natural than breathing. He started with something simple. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The opening movement flowed from his fingers like water, each note deliberate and full of emotion. The melody was haunting and beautiful, the kind of music that made people stop and feel something they had forgotten they could feel. Marcus lost himself in it completely, his eyes closing, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm. For the first time in months, he was not homeless. He was not hungry or cold or forgotten. He was simply a musician, and the music was everything. Around him, the station continued its morning chaos, but something was beginning to shift. A woman in a business suit walking past the piano slowed her steps. She had been rushing to catch her train, her mind already at her office, already working through the meeting scheduled for her day. But the music reached her ears and something made her stop. She stood there, briefcase in hand, and listened. The melody washed over her, stirring memories she had not thought about in years. Her grandmother's house, rainy afternoons, a simpler time. A teenager with a skateboard under his arm paused mid-step. He had been scrolling through his phone, barely aware of the world around him. But the music was different from the digital beats that usually filled his ears. It was raw and real and alive in a way that made him look up. He watched the homeless man at the piano, his fingers dancing across the keys with impossible grace, and something shifted in his understanding of the world. An elderly man leaning on a cane stopped near a pillar. He recognized the piece immediately. Beethoven. He had heard it 1,000 times in his long life, but never quite like this. There was something in the way this man played it, something desperate and hopeful and absolutely honest. It was the sound of a soul pouring itself out through music, holding nothing back. The old man felt tears prick his eyes and did not bother to wipe them away. More people were stopping now. A small crowd was forming around the piano, a semicircle of listeners drawn by something they could not quite name. Some stood with their arms crossed, skeptical but curious. Others had their phones out, recording the moment, sensing they were witnessing something unusual. A few simply stood in silence, letting the music wash over them, grateful for a moment of beauty in their hurried lives. Marcus played on, unaware of the growing audience. He transitioned seamlessly from Beethoven to Chopin, his fingers finding the familiar patterns of a nocturne that he had learned as a young man. The music filled the vast space of Grand Central Station, echoing off the high ceilings, competing with the announcements and footsteps and conversations, but somehow rising above it all. It was as if the piano had been waiting for him, waiting for someone who could make it sing like this. But not everyone was moved by the performance. Near the back of the growing crowd, 3 young men in expensive clothes stood watching with expressions of disgust and amusement. They were in their 20s, fresh out of college, working their first corporate jobs and feeling very important because of it. They looked at Marcus with the particular cruelty that comes from youth and privilege, seeing not a talented musician but a dirty homeless man who had no right to touch something so beautiful. One of them, a tall man with perfectly styled hair named Brett, nudged his friends and smirked. He spoke loudly enough for people nearby to hear, his voice dripping with mockery. "Look at this guy. Thinks he's some kind of concert pianist. Someone should tell him this isn't a homeless shelter. His friends laughed, encouraged by his boldness. Another one, shorter with an expensive watch that he kept glancing at, chimed in. Seriously. This is disgusting. We have to walk past this every day? The station should have better security. Keep these people out where they belong. The third friend, trying to impress the others with his own contribution, added his voice to the mockery. He's probably high on something. Look at those clothes. Guy probably hasn't showered in months and he's touching a public piano. That's a health hazard right there. Their words carried across the crowd and some people shifted uncomfortably. A few nodded in agreement, their brief moment of appreciation for the music now tainted by awareness of who was playing it. The woman in the business suit who had stopped to listen glanced at her watch and remembered her train. She had work to do. She could not stand here listening to a homeless man play piano, no matter how beautiful it sounded. She hurried away, her brief connection to something deeper already fading. Others in the crowd began to drift away too. Whatever spell the music had cast was breaking under the harsh light of judgment and social boundaries. This was not a concert hall. This was not a place where homeless people played grand pianos. This was reality, and reality had rules about who belonged where and what was appropriate. The teenager with the skateboard looked around, suddenly self-conscious about standing there. He moved on, though the music still played in his mind, but some remained. The elderly man with the cane did not move. A young mother holding her child's hand stood firm, her daughter watching the piano with wide, fascinated eyes. A janitor who had been sweeping nearby had stopped his work, leaning on his broom, listening with the intensity of someone who recognized true talent when he heard it. These people knew that something real was happening here, something that had nothing to do with appearances or social status. Marcus continued playing, but he had heard the comments. How could he not? They cut through the music like knives, each word a reminder of what he had become, how far he had fallen. His fingers faltered for just a moment, a single note landing wrong, breaking the perfection of the piece. Doubt crept into his mind like poison. What was he doing? These people were right. He had no business here. He was dirty and homeless and unwanted. This beautiful instrument deserved better than his touch. He could feel their eyes on him now, no longer just listening, but judging, measuring him against what a pianist should look like, what a musician should be, and he knew he failed every test. His clothes were wrong. His appearance was wrong. His entire existence was wrong in this space of marble and money and people with places to go. The music began to fade from his fingers. The notes came slower, less confident. The magic that had filled the station just moments ago was dying, killed by shame and the crushing weight of other people's judgment. Marcus felt his hands starting to shake, not from cold now, but from emotion. Anger, hurt, humiliation all mixed together into something that made it hard to breathe. He was about to stop, about to stand up and walk away, to return to his bench and his invisibility, to let the music die back into silence where maybe it belonged. His fingers hovered over the keys, frozen between continuing and giving up, between fighting for this one moment of dignity and accepting the truth that people like him did not get to have beautiful things. The three young men were still talking, their voices growing bolder, crueler. They were enjoying this now, enjoying the power of tearing someone down, of reminding everyone of the natural order of things. One of them had pulled out his phone, not to record the music, but to record the homeless man at the piano, already planning how he would share this moment with his friends, how they would all laugh about the crazy homeless guy who thought he could play Chopin. The station seemed to hold its breath in that moment. Marcus sat frozen at the piano, his hands trembling above the keys, the last notes of Chopin still echoing faintly in the vast space. The mockery of the three young men hung in the air like smoke, poisoning everything it touched. He could feel the weight of every eye on him, the judgment, the pity, the disgust. He wanted to disappear, to become invisible again, to return to the safety of being nobody. Then something shifted inside him. A memory surfaced, bright and clear as sunlight breaking through clouds. He was 8 years old, sitting at his mother's piano in their small apartment. He had just played for his music teacher, and the teacher had shaken his head, saying Marcus would never be good enough, that he lacked natural talent, that he should find a more realistic hobby. Marcus had been ready to quit right then, to never touch a piano again. But his mother had knelt down beside him, her hand gentle on his shoulder. She had looked into his tear-filled eyes and said something he had never forgotten. Baby, music is not about being good enough for other people. Music is about truth. When you play, you are not performing for them. You are sharing your soul, and there is nothing more powerful in this world than someone brave enough to share their truth, no matter who is watching. Marcus opened his eyes. He looked down at his hands, scarred and dirty, the hands of a man who had lost everything. But they were also the hands that had first touched a piano key when he was 5 years old. The hands his mother had taught to find beauty in 88 pieces of ivory and ebony. The hands that held music, the one thing poverty and loss could never steal from him. He took a deep breath and made a choice. He would not run. He would not let their cruelty silence him. Not today. Not when he had finally found a piano again. When the music inside him had finally found a way out. Whatever happened next, he would play. He would share his truth as his mother had taught him, and let the world do with it what it would. His fingers came down on the keys with a force and conviction that had been missing before. He switched to something different, something that matched the fire now burning in his chest. Rachmaninoff, Prelude in C-sharp minor, one of the most powerful and demanding pieces ever written, full of thunder and passion and raw emotion. It was a piece that required not just technical skill, but absolute commitment, total fearlessness. The opening chords crashed through the station like waves against rocks, deep, resonant bass notes that you felt in your bones, followed by a melody that climbed and soared and dove with breathtaking intensity. Marcus attacked the keys with everything he had, years of frustration and loss and anger and hope pouring out through his fingers. The piano responded like it had been waiting for this moment, for someone to play it with no holding back, no politeness, no careful restraint. The effect was immediate and electric. The few people who had remained stopped breathing, stopped moving, stopped thinking about anything except the music washing over them. This was not background music for a train station. This was not pleasant entertainment for commuters. This was art in its purest, most dangerous form. This was a human soul exposed and on fire, impossible to ignore, impossible to dismiss. The young mother tightened her grip on her daughter's hand, her eyes wide with shock and awe. She had studied music in college, had played piano herself once upon a time. She recognized immediately what she was hearing. This was not amateur playing. This was not someone who had picked up a few songs on YouTube. This was conservatory level. This was professional caliber. This was someone who should be on a concert stage, not sitting homeless in a train station. The elderly man with the cane lowered himself onto a nearby bench, overcome. He had heard Rachmaninoff played by masters in concert halls around the world during his long life. He had heard recordings by the greatest pianists of every generation, and this, what he was hearing now, belonged in that company. The technique was flawless, but more than that, the emotion was devastating. This man was not playing notes. He was bleeding music. More people were stopping now, drawn by the sheer force of the sound. The music was too powerful to ignore, too intense to walk past. Business people rushing to trains found themselves frozen in place. Students pulled out earbuds to hear properly. Even station employees stopped their work, drawn like moths to flame. A crowd was forming again, larger now, filling the space around the piano in ever-widening circles. Brett and his two friends had gone quiet. Their smirks had faded, replaced by confusion and something that might have been the beginning of understanding or shame. They had expected the homeless man to slink away at their words, to confirm their belief that he did not belong here. Instead, he was playing like nothing they had ever heard before. The cognitive dissonance was written clearly on their faces. Homeless people were not supposed to do this. They were not supposed to be talented. They were not supposed to make you feel something. The second friend, the one with the expensive watch, felt something crack open inside his chest. His father had forced him to take piano lessons as a child, and he had hated every minute, counting down the days until he could quit. He had thought of piano playing as boring, as something people did to show off at parties. He had never imagined it could sound like this, could feel like this, like lightning and thunder and the human heart all at once. Marcus played on, his eyes closed again, but his face transformed. There was no shame there now, no hesitation, no apology. There was only focus and power and absolute certainty. His whole body moved with the music, swaying and leaning, his shoulders rising and falling, his head tilting back at the most intense moments. He looked like a man possessed, like the music was playing him as much as he was playing it. The piece built toward its climax, the notes coming faster and harder, cascading over each other in waves of sound that filled every corner of the massive station. People pressed closer, drawn by the magnetic pull of true artistry. Phones were recording from every angle now, but not in mockery, in documentation, in the instinctive understanding that they were witnessing something rare and real and important. The janitor who had been listening from the beginning felt tears streaming down his face. He was from Honduras, had come to America dreaming of a better life, and now worked 14-hour days cleaning floors and toilets, invisible to almost everyone who passed him. But he understood what he was hearing. He understood what it meant to have a gift, to have talent, to have something beautiful inside you that the world had no place for. He understood what it cost to keep that beauty alive when everything else was falling apart. A security guard approached the edge of the crowd, radio in hand. Someone had called to complain about the disturbance, about the homeless man at the piano. The guard had been prepared to remove him, to clear him out like he did a dozen times a day with people who did not belong. But now he stood frozen, listening, his hand loosening on the radio. He had a daughter who played piano, had spent thousands of dollars on lessons and recitals. She was good, everyone said so. But she could not play like this. Nobody he had ever heard could play like this. Marcus drove toward the final chords with ferocious intensity. His fingers flew across the keys, hitting every note with precision and power. The music swelled to its conclusion. Massive and overwhelming, a sound that demanded to be heard, that could not be denied or diminished or ignored. He struck the final chords with everything he had left, letting them ring out long and clear and triumphant. Then silence, complete and absolute silence. 2,000 people in Grand Central Station, and not one of them made a sound. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity but was probably only seconds. Marcus sat at the piano, his hands still resting on the keys, his chest heaving from the physical and emotional effort of what he had just played. His eyes remained closed, not yet ready to face whatever judgment waited for him in the real world. In his mind, the music still echoed, perfect and complete, the way his mother had taught him it should be. Then someone started clapping. It was the elderly man with the cane, his weathered hands coming together with slow, deliberate force. The sound cracked through the silence like the first thunder before a storm, and then another person joined him. The young mother with her daughter, then the janitor, then the security guard, then someone else, and suddenly the entire crowd erupted into applause. It was not polite applause, the kind you give at the end of a mediocre performance because it is expected. This was thunderous, overwhelming, the kind of applause that comes from genuine emotion, from having witnessed something that moved you in a way you could not quite explain. People were not just clapping. They were cheering, whistling, shouting their approval. The sound bounced off the high ceilings of Grand Central Station, filling it with a roar of appreciation that matched the power of the music that had preceded it. Marcus opened his eyes slowly, blinking in confusion. He turned to look at the crowd, and what he saw almost broke him. Hundreds of faces, maybe more, all looking at him with expressions of joy, wonder, gratitude, respect. These were the same people who had walked past him on his bench every morning without a glance. The same people who saw him as invisible, as a problem to be avoided. Now they saw him, really saw him, not as a homeless man, but as an artist, a musician, a human being with a gift. The elderly man was making his way through the crowd, his cane tapping against the marble floor. He reached the piano and extended his hand to Marcus, his eyes bright with emotion. "Young man," he said, his voice thick, "I have heard Rachmaninoff played in Vienna, in Moscow, in Carnegie Hall, and what you just did belongs in that company. That was extraordinary." Marcus took his hand, unable to speak. The old man's grip was firm and warm, and it felt like the first real human contact Marcus had experienced in months. "Thank you," he finally managed to whisper, his voice rough from disuse and emotion. Others were pressing forward now, wanting to shake his hand, to say something, to somehow be part of this moment. The young mother introduced herself as Sarah, told him she had studied music, that she knew talent when she heard it. Her daughter, maybe 6 years old, looked up at Marcus with eyes full of wonder and asked in a small, clear voice, "Can you teach me to play like that?" The question pierced Marcus's heart. Here was a child who saw past the dirty clothes and unkempt beard, who heard only the music and wanted to learn. He knelt down to her level, and despite everything, despite the shame he still carried about his appearance, he smiled. "If you practice every day," he told her gently, And if you play with your whole heart, you can learn to play anything. The janitor from Honduras approached, tears still wet on his face. He spoke with a thick accent, his English imperfect but his emotion clear. I clean the station every day. Every day I am invisible. Like you are invisible. But what you did just now, nobody can ignore that. You showed them. You showed all of them who you really are. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, pressing it into Marcus's hand. Please, take it. You earned it. You earned more than this. Marcus tried to refuse, but the man insisted. And then others were reaching into their pockets and purses. Bills and coins began piling up on the piano's closed lid. 1s and 5s and 10s and 20s. A businessman in an expensive suit dropped a $100 bill onto the pile without a word. Just a nod of respect. A college student added her last $5, saying it was worth it to have heard something so beautiful. The crowd around the piano was growing even larger now as people who had missed the performance heard about it from others and came to see what the commotion was about. Videos of Marcus playing were already spreading through social media, uploaded by dozens of people who had recorded the moment. The hashtags were forming organically. Someone had written, "Homeless piano player Grand Central," and it was already gaining traction. But not everyone in the crowd was moved by what had happened. Brett and his two friends stood at the back, their faces flushed with embarrassment and anger. They had been made to look foolish, their mockery rendered powerless by the undeniable talent they had just witnessed. Instead of gracefully accepting that they had been wrong, they doubled down on their cruelty, the way people often do when their worldview is challenged. "So he can play piano," Brett said loudly to his friends, making sure others could hear. "That does not change what he is. He is still homeless, still probably mentally ill or on drugs. One skill does not make him some kind of hero." His voice carried an edge of desperation, a need to regain the upper hand in a situation that had spiraled away from his control. One of his friends nodded eagerly, grateful for the validation. "Exactly. This whole thing is getting ridiculous. Everyone acting like we just witnessed some miracle. The guy played a piano, big deal. Meanwhile, he probably has diseases, probably has not paid taxes in years, probably contributes nothing to society, but everyone wants to act like he is Mozart or something." The third friend, the one who had been quieter during the mockery, looked uncomfortable now. The music had affected him in a way he did not want to admit, had cracked something open that he preferred to keep closed. But peer pressure and pride kept him nodding along, kept him from saying what he was really thinking, which was that maybe, just maybe, they had been terribly wrong. Their words created a ripple through the nearest section of the crowd. Some people frowned and moved away from the three young men, disapproving of their continued cruelty, but others nodded in subtle agreement, their brief moment of being moved by music now giving way to more practical concerns. This was still a homeless man, after all, a talented one certainly, but that did not solve the larger problems. It did not address the fact that he lived on the streets, that he might have mental health issues or substance abuse problems, that he represented a failure of the system that people preferred not to think about too deeply. Sarah, the young mother, heard Brett's comments and turned to face him, her expression hardening. "You know what the real difference is between him and you?" she said clearly, her voice cutting through the chatter. "He has a gift that brings beauty into the world. What do you have? What do you contribute besides judgment and cruelty?" Brett's face reddened further. "I have a job," he shot back. "I have a home. I pay my bills. I do not sit around expecting handouts from strangers. That is the difference." "He is not expecting handouts," Sarah countered, her arm sweeping to indicate the money piling up on the piano. "People are giving freely because what he shared moved them, because he offered something valuable. Can you say the same?" The confrontation was drawing more attention. People were choosing sides, some agreeing with Brett's practical assessment, others defending Marcus and the beauty of what they had just experienced. The crowd was dividing along invisible lines of empathy and judgment, each person's response revealing something about their own values, their own experiences, their own capacity for seeing past surface appearances. Marcus watched it all unfold with a mix of gratitude and discomfort. He had not wanted this. He had just wanted to play piano, to let the music out before it consumed him from the inside. Now he was at the center of something bigger, something he did not understand and could not control. People were arguing about him, debating his worth, using him as a symbol for their own. Beliefs about society and morality and who deserved what. The security guard who had been prepared to remove Marcus earlier now found himself in the uncomfortable position of having to decide what to do. Technically, the piano was public, meant for anyone to use. But there were also rules about soliciting, about disturbing the peace, about loitering. The pile of money on the piano complicated things. Was this a performance or panhandling? Was Marcus an artist or a homeless person taking advantage? His radio crackled to life. His supervisor was asking for a status update. Other guards were reporting complaints from commuters who felt the crowd was blocking access to the trains. The security guard stood frozen, his hand on his radio, caught between duty and conscience. His name was James Patterson, and he had worked at Grand Central Station for 12 years. He had removed countless homeless people from these halls, following protocol, maintaining order, keeping the station safe and presentable for the millions of commuters who passed through. It was his job. It was what he got paid to do. But this felt different. He looked at Marcus, still sitting at the piano, looking overwhelmed and small despite what he had just accomplished. Then he looked at the crowd, at the genuine emotion on their faces, at the little girl who was still staring at the piano with wonder. He thought about his own daughter, about the piano lessons he could barely afford, about the recital he had attended last week where she had played a simple piece with great concentration, but little passion. His supervisor's voice came through the radio again, more insistent this time. Patterson, respond. We need that situation cleared up. The morning rush is getting backed up. James pressed the button on his radio. Copy that, he said slowly. Situation is under control. No action needed. The crowd is dispersing naturally. It was not entirely true, but it was not entirely false either. Some people were drifting away, headed back to their trains and their lives, carrying the memory of the music with them. He released the radio button and made a decision that would probably cost him a write-up later. He was going to let this play out. Whatever this was, it mattered more than keeping the flow of foot traffic perfectly smooth. Some things were more important than protocol. Marcus was trying to gather the money from the piano lid, his hands shaking as he picked up bills and coins. It was more money than he had seen in months, maybe close to $500. It was enough for a cheap hotel room for a few nights. Enough for clean clothes. Enough for a hot meal that did not come from a shelter or a dumpster. But more than the money, it was what the money represented. Recognition, value. The acknowledgement that what he had done mattered. An older woman in an elegant coat approached him, her manner confident and purposeful. She had the bearing of someone used to being listened to, someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. Her name was Eleanor Hartley, and she was on the board of the New York City Arts Foundation. She had stopped to watch the performance while waiting for her train, and what she had witnessed had shifted something in her carefully organized world. Excuse me, she said to Marcus, her voice cultured and precise. May I have a word with you? Marcus looked up at her nervously, unsure what to expect. People like her did not usually want to have words with people like him, and when they did, it was rarely good news. Yes, ma'am? He said, falling into old patterns of deference. Eleanor studied him for a moment, seeing past the exterior to something deeper. That was Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, she said. One of the most technically demanding pieces in the repertoire. You played it with exceptional skill and remarkable emotional depth. Where did you train? The question caught Marcus off guard. Nobody had asked him about his past in so long that he had almost forgotten there was anything to ask about. I studied at Juilliard, he said quietly, the words feeling strange in his mouth. A long time ago. I did not finish. Life got in the way. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. Juilliard. That explained the technique, the understanding of the music. But it also made the situation even more tragic. Here was someone who had been trained at one of the world's finest music schools. Someone with real talent, living on the streets of New York. The waste of it made her angry at a system that could let this happen. What happened? She asked more gently now. How did you end up here? Marcus hesitated. It was a long story and not one he liked to tell. But something about Eleanor's direct gaze made him want to answer honestly. I left school to help my mother when she got sick, he began, his voice low. Cancer. She needed someone to take care of her, and I was all she had. By the time she passed, I had been away from music too long. The scholarship was gone. I could not afford to go back. He paused, the memories flooding back faster now. I got a job. Office work. I was good with numbers, so I ended up in finance. Met a woman. Got married. Had a daughter. Built a life that looked good from the outside. But the music never left. It was always there, like a ghost, reminding me of what I had given up. Then the recession hit. Lost my job. The mortgage went underwater. My wife, she tried to understand, but watching everything fall apart was too much. She took our daughter and left. I do not blame her. She needed stability, and I could not provide it anymore. After the divorce, after losing the house, I could not get back on my feet. One thing led to another, and here I am. Eleanor listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. She had heard stories like this before. Variations on the theme of how quickly a life could unravel, how little separated the successful from the struggling, but hearing it from someone with Marcus's obvious talent made it hit differently. "Here is what I am going to do," she said decisively. "I am going to give you my card. I want you to call me this afternoon. I know people who run music programs, who manage concert venues, who could use someone with your skills. At the very least, I can help you get connected with resources, housing assistance, job placement, mental health services if you need them." She reached into her designer purse and pulled out a business card, pressing it into Marcus's hand. "I am serious about this, call me. Do not let pride or fear stop you. You have a gift that the world needs to hear, but first we need to get you stable." Marcus stared at the card, Eleanor Hartley's name embossed in elegant script. Part of him wanted to believe this was real, that maybe this moment of playing piano could be a turning point. But another part, the part that had been beaten down by months of disappointment and rejection, whispered that it was probably false hope. People said things in the heat of emotion that they did not follow through on later. Brett and his friends had been watching this interaction with increasing annoyance. Brett's face was now a mask of barely contained frustration. He had come to Grand Central Station this morning feeling good about himself, about his life, about his place in the world. Now he felt attacked, judged, made to feel like the bad guy simply for stating uncomfortable truths. He pushed forward through the crowd, his friends trailing behind him. "This is unbelievable," he said loudly, addressing Eleanor but speaking to everyone. "You are all acting like this is some fairy tale, like giving this guy some money and a business card is going to fix anything. You want to know what is really going to happen? He is going to take that money and spend it on drugs or alcohol. That card is going into the trash as soon as you walk away, because that is what people like him do." Eleanor turned to face Brett with the kind of cold stare that had made junior employees at her foundation reconsider their career choices. "And what exactly do you know about people like him?" she asked, her voice dangerous. "I know reality," Brett shot back, emboldened by his own self-righteousness. "I know that if he was really talented, really worth investing in, he would not be homeless in the first place. The world rewards talent. That is how it works. If you are good enough, you succeed. If you do not succeed, it is because you were not good enough or you made bad choices. That is not cruel. That is just truth." A murmur went through the crowd. Some people looked uncomfortable with Brett's bluntness, but others were nodding. It was an old argument, one that divided people along fundamental lines about fairness, merit, and personal responsibility. Did success prove worth? Did failure prove weakness? Or was the world more complicated than that? The janitor from Honduras, who had been standing quietly nearby, spoke up suddenly. His accented English was halting, but his message was clear. "You talk about choices," he said to Brett. "You think we all start from same place? You think if I practice piano every day since I am 5 years old, I get to play in Carnegie Hall? No, I practice surviving. I practice feeding my family. I practice staying invisible so I do not get deported." He gestured at Marcus. "Maybe this man made mistakes. Maybe he had bad luck. Maybe both. But he has something beautiful inside him. Something that made all these people stop and feel. You have good job, nice clothes, everything working for you. But what do you have inside that makes anyone stop? That makes anyone feel?" The janitor's words hung in the air like a challenge, and for the first time, Brett seemed genuinely shaken. His face flushed deeper, and his mouth opened and closed several times before he could formulate a response. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost some of its confident edge. "That is not the point. I am not saying I am some great artist. I am saying that we live in a society with rules and structures for a reason. You cannot just throw money at every sob story and expect it to solve anything." But the crowd's mood had shifted decisively against him. Even those who might have privately agreed with some of his points were put off by his tone, his arrogance, his inability to read the room. A middle-aged businessman who had been standing quietly nearby stepped forward. "I used to think like you," the businessman said, addressing Brett but speaking loud enough for others to hear. "I worked my way up from nothing, made my money through hard work and smart decisions. I believed everyone could do the same if they just tried hard enough. Then my brother got sick. Cancer, like this man's mother. Lost his job because of the medical leave. Lost his insurance. Lost his savings paying for treatments. Within a year, he was bankrupt. Within 2 years, he was living in his car." The businessman's voice cracked slightly. "My brother. A man who worked harder than anyone I knew. A good man. A smart man. And the system chewed him up and spit him out. I helped him eventually, got him back on his feet. But it taught me something. Sometimes the difference between success and homelessness is not talent or character. Sometimes it is just luck. Just timing. Just whether you have someone who can catch you when you fall." Several people in the crowd were nodding now, some wiping at their eyes. Everyone, it seemed, had a story or knew someone who had a story. The line between stability and chaos was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. It was comfortable to believe that homelessness was the result of moral failing, of bad choices, of lack of effort. It was much more frightening to acknowledge how easily it could happen to anyone. Brett looked around at the faces surrounding him, and for the first time, he seemed to realize he had lost this battle. His friends were backing away, trying to distance themselves from the situation. The one who had been uncomfortable earlier actually walked away completely, disappearing into the crowd with his head down. Brett stood alone, isolated by his own cruelty, and the expression on his face was a mixture of defiance and something that might have been the beginning of doubt. "Fine," he said finally, his voice tight. "You all want to play savior to the homeless guy, go ahead. See how that works out." He turned and walked away, his expensive shoes clicking loudly against the marble floor, the sound echoing his retreat. As Brett disappeared into the crowd, the tension that had gripped the gathering began to ease. People started to relax, to breathe again. Some were checking their watches, remembering they had trains to catch, lives to return to. But they lingered a moment longer, reluctant to leave this strange, charged atmosphere, this brief intersection of art and reality that had disrupted their morning routine. Marcus sat at the piano, overwhelmed by everything that had happened in the last 30 minutes. He clutched Eleanor's business card in one hand and the money from the piano lid in the other. His mind was racing, trying to process it all. The mockery, the music, the applause, the arguments, the offers of help. It felt surreal, like a dream he might wake from at any moment to find himself back on his cold bench, invisible and forgotten. Eleanor checked her phone, saw she had missed her train, and made a decision. She would take the next one. This was more important. She turned back to Marcus, her expression softening. "I mean what I said. Call me today. I'm going to text you the address of a shelter that I work with. They have proper resources, people who can help with the practical steps, getting ID documents, accessing services, that kind of thing. But beyond that, I want to help you get back to music." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I am not going to pretend I can fix everything. Homelessness is complicated. There might be issues I do not know about yet, things that need to be addressed before you can move forward. But I have seen a lot of talented people in my career, and I know real skill when I see it. What you have is real. It would be a crime to let it go to waste." Marcus found his voice rough with emotion. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why do you care? You do not know me. I could be everything that guy said I was. I could take this money and disappear and you would never see me again." Eleanor smiled slightly. "You could," she acknowledged. "That is your choice. But I do not think you will. You know why? Because of the way you played. I have worked in music my entire adult life. I know the difference between technical proficiency and genuine artistry. What you played came from somewhere deep, from someone who loves music not for what it can get them, but for what it is. Those people do not usually throw away second chances." She glanced at her phone again. "I really do have to go now. But Marcus, please. Call me, let me help. Not because I think I am some kind of savior, but because the world needs more beauty in it and you can provide that. It seems wasteful not to try." With that, Eleanor Hartley walked away, her elegant coat swishing behind her, leaving Marcus sitting at the piano with more hope than he had felt in years and more fear of disappointment than he wanted to admit. The crowd was thinning now. The morning rush was picking back up, people remembering their obligations, their deadlines, their normal lives. But something had shifted in Grand Central Station that morning. The people who had witnessed Marcus play would carry that memory with them. Some would talk about it at work, describing the homeless man who played like a concert pianist. Some would watch the videos again on their phones during their lunch breaks. Some would find themselves thinking about it late at night, wondering what had happened to him, hoping the story had a happy ending. Sarah, the young mother, approached Marcus before leaving. Her daughter was tugging at her hand, impatient to go, but Sarah needed to say something. "I meant what I said earlier," she told him. "About teaching. I am serious. If you get back on your feet, if you end up wanting to teach piano, please reach out. My daughter needs to learn from someone who understands that music is not just about the notes. It is about the soul." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. He had not cried in months, had trained himself not to, believing tears were a luxury he could not afford. But kindness, genuine kindness without pity, was breaking through his defenses. "Thank you," he whispered. "That means more than you know." The janitor approached next, this time with 2 other janitors he had called over. They each handed Marcus a few dollars, money they could barely spare but wanted to contribute. "We see you," one of them said simply. "We see you, brother." Even James Patterson, the security guard, came over. He did not give Marcus money, but he did something perhaps more valuable. He gave him information. "Listen," he said quietly. "I am probably going to get in trouble for not clearing you out earlier. But I do not regret it. That was something special. Now some practical advice. The piano is officially available for public use, but people get priority if they reserve it through the arts program. It is free to reserve. You need an email address and a phone number. I do not know your situation, but the public library a few blocks from here has computers you can use, and there are free phone programs for people in need. If you want to play here again, do it right. Reserve the time. That way nobody can say you are loitering." Marcus absorbed this information, grateful for the practical help. It was one thing to receive kindness and money, but actionable advice on how to navigate the system was something else entirely. "Thank you," he said. "I will look into that." As the crowd finally dispersed, Marcus found himself alone at the piano once more. The station returned to its normal rhythm, the brief disruption fading into memory. He carefully folded the bills and put them in his pocket, tucking Eleanor's card into his backpack where it would not get lost or damaged. He stood up from the piano bench, his legs stiff from sitting, and looked at the instrument one last time. It sat there gleaming and beautiful, silent now, but full of possibility. Marcus reached out and touched the keys one more time, gently, reverently. "Thank you," he whispered to the piano, feeling foolish but needing to say it anyway. Marcus walked out of Grand Central Station into the cold November morning, with more purpose in his steps than he had felt in months. The money in his pocket felt heavy, significant, like it carried weight beyond its monetary value. It was proof that what had happened was real, that he had not imagined the applause or the kindness or Eleanor's business card, that now rested safely in his backpack. His first stop was a small diner 2 blocks from the station. He had walked past it 1,000 times, looking through the windows at people eating warm food, never daring to go inside. But today was different. Today he had money, honestly earned through his music. He pushed open the door, feeling the blast of heat and the smell of coffee and bacon wash over him. The waitress looked at him with barely concealed distaste when he entered. She had seen his type before, homeless people who would nurse a single cup of coffee for hours, taking up space that could go to paying customers. But Marcus walked directly to a booth and sat down, pulling out a $20 bill and placing it on the table where she could see it. The gesture was clear. He was a customer. He belonged here. He ordered eggs, toast, bacon, coffee, and orange juice. Real food, hot food. When it arrived, he ate slowly, savoring every bite, trying to make it last. Around him, other customers glanced his way occasionally, their expressions ranging from curiosity to discomfort. He did not care. Let them look. He had earned this meal. He had earned his place in this booth. As he ate, Marcus pulled out Eleanor's business card and studied it. Eleanor Hartley, Director of Programming, New York City Arts Foundation. There was a phone number, an email address, a physical address, all the contact information he needed. The question was whether he had the courage to use it. His mind played out scenarios. He would call, and she would not remember him. Or worse, she would remember, but would have changed her mind in the cold light of day, realizing that helping a homeless man was more complicated than she had imagined in the emotional aftermath of his performance. Or maybe she would try to help, but it would not work out. Maybe there were barriers he did not know about yet. Problems that could not be solved with a few phone calls and good intentions. But then he remembered the way she had looked at him. The certainty in her voice when she said what he had was real. The businesslike efficiency with which she had handed him her card. Eleanor Hartley did not seem like someone who made promises lightly or offered help she could not deliver. She was connected, powerful, used to making things happen. If anyone could actually help him, it was probably her. After finishing his meal, Marcus walked to the public library that James Patterson had mentioned. It was a beautiful old building, all stone and columns, a temple to knowledge and public service. He climbed the steps and pushed through the heavy doors into the warm, quiet interior. A librarian at the desk looked up as he entered, and Marcus saw the familiar flash of judgment cross her face before she schooled it into professional neutrality. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. "I need to use a computer," Marcus said, "and I need information about getting a phone." The librarian studied him for a moment. Then something in her expression softened slightly. Maybe she had seen the videos online. Maybe she recognized him. Or maybe she was just a kind person doing a job that required dealing with all kinds of people, with all kinds of needs. "Computers are upstairs," she said. "You will need a library card. Do you have ID?" Marcus shook his head. His driver's license had expired months ago, and he had lost his wallet before that. The librarian sighed. "Okay, let me see what we can do. We have programs for people in your situation." 20 minutes later, Marcus sat in front of a computer with a temporary library card and a sheet of paper listing resources for homeless individuals. The librarian, whose name tag identified her as Patricia, had been surprisingly helpful once she understood his situation. She had walked him through how to set up a free email account and had given him information about a program that provided free cell phones to people in need. Marcus created an email address, something simple and professional. Then he spent an hour applying for the phone program, filling out forms online, navigating bureaucratic websites that seemed designed to frustrate. But he persisted, motivated by the memory of music pouring from his fingers, by the weight of Eleanor's business card in his pocket. By early afternoon, Marcus had accomplished more practical tasks than he had in weeks. He had an email address. He had applied for a phone. He had eaten a real meal. He had even taken the time to wash his face and hands in the library bathroom, though he knew he still looked homeless. That would take more than a quick wash to fix. Now came the hard part. He pulled up his email, took Eleanor's card from his pocket, and began typing. The message took him 30 minutes to write. He introduced himself, reminded her of their meeting at Grand Central Station, thanked her for her kindness, and asked if her offer of help was still available. He read it over a dozen times, changing words, adding details, taking them away again. Finally, when he could not improve it any further without overthinking himself into paralysis, he hit send. The waiting began. Marcus knew he would not get a response immediately. Eleanor was probably busy with meetings and responsibilities. She might not even check her email until the evening. But every 5 minutes he refreshed his inbox, hoping to see a reply. The library closed at 6. By then, there was still no response, and Marcus felt the familiar weight of disappointment settling over him. He spent that night in a shelter, but for the first time in weeks, it felt less like defeat and more like a temporary situation. He had hope now, fragile and tentative, but real. He kept Eleanor's card tucked safely in his pocket, checking it every so often to make sure it had not disappeared, that he had not dreamed the whole thing. The next morning, Marcus returned to the library as soon as it opened. Patricia, the librarian, greeted him with a small smile of recognition. He signed in for computer time and opened his email with trembling fingers. There, at the top of his inbox, was a message from Eleanor Hartley. His heart pounded as he clicked it open. The email was brief but warm. Eleanor apologized for not responding sooner. She had been in meetings all afternoon and evening the previous day. Yes, her offer was absolutely still available. She had already been making calls on his behalf. Could he meet her at her office tomorrow at 10 in the morning? She included the address and detailed directions for getting there by subway. Marcus read the email 3 times, making sure he understood correctly. She had been making calls on his behalf. She was already working to help him, even before he had reached out. The reality of it hit him like a wave. This was happening. This was actually happening. He typed a response, confirming the meeting and thanking her again. Then he sat back in his chair and allowed himself a moment to just breathe. Around him, the library hummed with quiet activity. People reading, studying, searching for jobs, escaping the cold. He was one of them. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like more than just a person surviving. He felt like someone with a future. The following morning, Marcus woke early at the shelter. He used the shower facilities, scrubbing himself as clean as possible with the small bar of soap provided. He shaved his beard using a disposable razor, wincing as the dull blade scraped across his skin. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. He was still thin, still worn, but there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Determination, purpose, hope. He put on the cleanest clothes he had, which were still shabby, but at least relatively free of stains. Then he made his way to the subway, using some of the money from his piano performance to buy a ticket. The address Eleanor had given him led to a building in Midtown Manhattan, all glass and steel and modern architecture. Marcus stood outside for a full 5 minutes, gathering his courage before walking through the revolving door. The lobby was impressive, with marble floors and a high ceiling. A security guard at a desk looked at him suspiciously until Marcus explained he had an appointment with Eleanor Hartley. The guard made a phone call, then, looking surprised, directed Marcus to the elevators. 16th floor. When the elevator doors opened, Marcus found himself in a tastefully decorated office space. A receptionist greeted him professionally and asked him to wait. He sat in a comfortable chair, feeling completely out of place among the art prints and modern furniture. Other people came and went, all well-dressed and confident, all belonging in a way he did not. Then Eleanor emerged from an inner office and her face lit up with genuine pleasure when she saw him. "Marcus," she said warmly, crossing the room to shake his hand. "I am so glad you came. Come on back." Her office was large and filled with light. Pictures of various performances and events covered the walls. Eleanor gestured for Marcus to sit, then took a seat across from him rather than behind her desk, making the interaction feel less formal, more personal. "Let me tell you what I have been doing," she began without preamble. "I have spoken with several people in my network. First Housing. I have a contact at a transitional housing program specifically for artists. They have a room available, and I have vouched for you. It is not permanent, but it gives you a stable place for 6 months while you get back on your feet." Marcus felt his throat tighten. A room, his own room, for 6 months. Eleanor continued. "Second, I have arranged for you to audition for a teaching position at a community music school in Brooklyn. They work with underprivileged kids teaching piano and other instruments. The pay is modest but steady. They were very interested when I told them about your background." She leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. "Third, and this is the big one, I have spoken to the director of programming at the Kaufman Center. They run a series called Voices of New York, where they feature musicians with compelling stories. They want you to perform. It would be a full recital, Marcus. A real concert with promotion and press and everything. It would be in 3 months, which gives you time to prepare and get settled." Marcus could not speak. He tried, but no words would come. A room, a job, a concert. Things he had not dared to even dream about were being laid out before him like gifts. Eleanor's expression softened. "I know this is overwhelming, and I want to be clear about something. This is not charity. This is investment. I believe in your talent. I believe you can succeed. But it will take work, hard work. You will need to practice every day. You will need to show up on time, be reliable, prove that investing in you was the right decision. Can you do that?" Marcus found his voice finally rough with emotion. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I can do that. I will do that. I promise you, I will not let you down." Eleanor smiled. "I know you will not. Now let me give you the details." 6 months later, Marcus Hayes stood backstage at the Kaufman Center, wearing a tuxedo that fit him properly, his hair cut and neat, his hands clean and steady. He could hear the audience taking their seats beyond the curtain, hundreds of people who had come to hear him play. The story of the homeless pianist had spread far beyond that morning in Grand Central Station. The videos had gone viral. News outlets had picked up the story. And now here he was, about to walk onto a concert stage for the first time in his life. He thought about his mother, wished she could be here to see this. Then he thought about all the people who had helped him get to this moment. Eleanor, who had believed in him when he could barely believe in himself. Patricia, the librarian, who had helped him navigate the system. James, the security guard, who had given him practical advice. Sarah and her daughter, who had seen past his appearance to the musician inside. Even the janitor from Honduras, who had reminded him that being seen, truly seen, was valuable in itself. The stage manager gave him the signal. Marcus took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and walked out onto the stage. The applause washed over him, warm and welcoming. He sat at the piano, a beautiful Steinway grand, and placed his hands on the keys. For a moment he just sat there, feeling the weight of this moment, the miracle of it. Then Marcus Hayes began to play.